Good evening. I call to order the Hampden-Wilbraham School Committee meeting for Thursday, March 4th, 2021. The time is 5:32. Cheryl is not here this evening, so I'm filling in as the chair. I'd like to start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Michelle Immersion, would you like to lead us? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Per Governor Baker's order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law C-30A, Section 20, the public will not be allowed to physically access the school committee meeting. Members of the committee and the public will be able to access the meeting via remote meeting technology, such as Zoom, and the necessary access information will be posted prior to the meeting. The video of the Zoom meeting will be posted on the district's website as soon as practicable. So first up, we have public comment. Okay. I'm told there are no signups, so we'll move on to the HWRSD updates.
Great. Thank you. Good evening. There's a couple of things we're going to talk about in the health and safety protocol updates. I've actually asked Terry Brand and Misty Foss-Trombley if they could join us tonight, as they do at every school committee meeting, just to give a little update about what's taking place in terms of our community, what's taking place in terms of vaccination, and as well as, I know a question came up with the HWA and as well as school committee in regards to pool testing from the last school committee meeting we had. And if I could just turn it over to Terry and Misty, please.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Unfortunately, I can't give you the weekly, excuse me, town city report. I just checked, it's running late tonight coming out, but we had been in the yellow last week. We know that Wilbraham will continue to be in the yellow. I anticipate Hampden possibly the same. We're definitely seeing some positive data trends over time. Our Wilbraham test positivity rate is down below 2%. So that is very good news. And we're seeing our local school community data trending in the same direction. So we're very encouraged by that. And we just encourage everyone to continue to follow all the mitigation strategies and keep any sick children home, even with minimal symptoms. Consult the school nurse and seek consultation with a physician and get tested. And that will continue to help us keep these positive data trends going. Al?
Yes.
Hey, so Sean's as an attendee. Can we just move him over to the panelist, please? Kate, thank you.
All set, moved over.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Question on what Terry said so far? And if, good.
Yep.
Everyone okay with that? Any questions, any comments on where we're at with health updates? Okay. So moving on, we'll go into the youth risk behavior survey. This is an annual thing that we do every year. I've asked Gina Khan, she joins us to just go a little review of what's taken place. Gina, if I can ask you to just talk a little bit about that for us, please.
Good evening. Thank you so much for the invitation. Probably about a year ago, we were getting ready to launch our 2020 annual youth risk behavior survey. And I'm sure that I visited you and described our annual process. And unfortunately, our 2020 survey was not administered last year because we typically do this in April. And by the time April rolled around, access to our students was not available. This year, we are definitely still dealing with some challenges in administering our annual survey. But it felt like more than ever, this is really the time where we want to be able to gather a little bit of input and understanding of what is going on for our students and their lives around these risk factors and protective factors that we really rely on our survey to give us that snapshot on an annual basis. And so we have had to work around some logistics, but I am here tonight to tell you that we are very happy to be moving forward with the 2021 Youth Risk Behavior Survey. At the end of this week, letters will be going out to our middle school, and I say middle school, but the survey is only administered to students in 7th and 8th grade at the middle school level. So that parent letter will be going out by the end of the week or over the weekend for their survey administration interval, which is scheduled on March 30th and April 1st during their advisory blocks. And at the high school, that letter to parents describing the survey process and with just a few minor variations of our typical letter, that letter will be going out by the middle of next week. And by March 10th on the website, and this is something that we actually have the school committee to thank for, several years ago, it was recommended that we post a review version of the surveys, middle and high school, because there are slight differences on the website so that parents could not only review the survey and make a decision, because the survey is voluntary, and in that letter that parents will receive, they will have the option of telling us that they do not wish their child to participate in the survey, and there will be instructions on how to communicate that in the letter. But in addition, we really hope that by posting the surveys on the website, this will give our families an opportunity to look at the survey and maybe engage in some of these meaningful discussions at home with their children. So I'm here tonight just to give you that little bit of a heads up that that information is heading out the door by the end of the week, that our survey periods will be, as I said, March 30th and April 1st for our 7th and 8th graders at Wilbraham Middle and Green Meadows. And for our high school students, and just again to refresh your memories, for high school students, we administer the survey through the health PE classes, which means that the sample, the high school sample for all these years, since 1995, I have to say, has been those students who have health, physical education in the spring or alternating day. Not all students are surveyed because a sample is actually a very good way in which we can gauge our data. Survey data is not perfect, but it is a really strong and solid window. We've shortened the survey a little bit this year because our students are on their computers an awful lot. And we really just wanted to get to some of those core questions, which again, I know I am giving you information that you already know, but maybe for those who are watching this tonight, to familiarize that those questions really do focus on the typical health and wellness questions, and with emphasis on substance misuse and attitudes towards substance use. And this year there are some mental health questions that we would like to know around behaviors associated with depression and general health. We definitely have focused a lot more on e-cigarettes and vaping because of that particular issue. Around our safety, we ask questions that pertain to bullying and harassment and emotional safety. And for our high school students, not for our middle, but for our high school students, we ask a couple of questions that are specific to thoughts of suicide to give us some indicators that continue to inform our curriculum around suicide prevention. As I said, we are administering for middle school through advisory and for high school through that spring and alternating day health PE. The survey is voluntary and anonymous, so it's not a screening. We are not associating students' responses with specific students. But again, and I think this was also a recommendation given to us over the years by school committee, we do give students an opportunity to then click onto a different way of accessing a request to perhaps talk to a counselor about something, one of the topics on the survey. This opportunity is removed from the survey because it's important that the survey itself remain anonymous in order to give us valid results. That's all I have to say about the survey. Of course, I have one other thing to talk to you about, but I'm going to pause here and ask if you have any questions about the survey.
And again, this is something we do every year. Last year, we didn't do it because of the situation we're in with COVID. Any questions for Gina Connell? Okay, Gina, what else do you got?
So I do have wonderful news about, you may have noticed our coalition has been very busy trying very hard to provide almost monthly opportunities for parents around issues that what we're calling the Parenting Now series, because, you know, we're parents, but we're parenting now in a different world. And we are so excited to be welcoming at the end of March. So March, I'm looking at the dates, March 30th for our elementary parents and March 31st, Wednesday, for our middle high school. The Search Institute will be doing 2 separate workshops called Strengthening Families. And it is really about the connections of family relationships and positive youth outcomes. It's one of those workshops that is intended to access our resilience. And as their description says, parents and families do a lot of things right when it comes to raising children. But unfortunately, in these turbulent times, we rarely stop to think about that and think about how we can build on what is already going well. Registration will be limited to 40 people per session. And those flyers will be heading out next week. So for those of you listening tonight, if you have interest in this, please don't hesitate to contact me, gcon@hwrsd.org. Please visit the coalition website, hwp4y.org. And stay tuned because this will be coming, this little notice here will be coming your way via the typical channels of our principals communication and the school and coalition website. Thank you so much for this opportunity, folks. If there are no more questions, I will shut my microphone, promise.
Thank you, Gina.
Thanks, Gina.
Thanks, Gina. Appreciate that input. And appreciate about their youth risk behavior survey as well too. If I could just go a little out of order, I'd just like to do the enrollment report first, and then I'll go back to my update as superintendent as well too. Kate, if you can just put that in up front, and I apologize for going a little out of order. If you just take a look, so one of the things that we talked about, we got a little action on providing this monthly update enrollment. We started last month and starting provided to you. We've looked at it a number of different ways. Just know that as of February 1st, 2021, the district had 2,876 students. For March 1st, a month later, we have 2,878. There's a plus of 2. If you take a look though, as the information that's provided for it, it goes up and down. There's some fluctuation there, both whether it be at the preschool, at Mile Tree, at the high school in grade 12, you'll see that some of the students graduated early. So there's some fluctuation, but overall there's a +2 of enrollment in our school district of 2,878. Questions on that at all?
How does early graduation work?
So they don't graduate early, but they completed all the requirements of that. So they might be able to go off and they completed the necessary things, and they go off and could be starting to work or whatever. They'll go through the graduation ceremonies that will take place when we have them. And that's to be determined as well too, but they've completed all the course requirements to graduate.
Well, good for them.
Yep.
Okay. Any questions on enrollment? Seeing as none, do you want to do your superintendent's update?
Sure. So good evening. So couple things. It certainly has been an interesting few days in education, certainly in the state of Massachusetts. I think it's important tonight and I know there's a communication that went out to the HWEA, and it went out to the community as well this evening as well, just sort of giving an update about what's taken place. So I just literally want to go over a timeline. I think is the best way to address this. So last Wednesday, February 24th, the Commissioner of Education met with superintendents. We had a half-hour meeting with them. During that time, 20 minutes of it, we spoke about things in terms of course and some other things that involve educating our, I think someone has to either mute or their volume, I'm sorry. Talked about a couple different situations. The biggest thing that the remaining 10 minutes that we discussed with him was about returning to full in-person education for kindergarten through grade 5 for the state of Massachusetts for all schools by April 5th. I'm going to literally go over what took place and how that happened and where we are right now. So he informed us that all students in kindergarten through grade 5 in the state of Massachusetts will be back in person 5 days a week. What's happening is tomorrow at 2 o'clock, he'll be going to the Board of Education as the commissioner and granting to get permission so that he can mandate that all schools will be in person K to 5. We'll pay attention to what takes place with that. The other piece of that is, so this was new information for us, and I think you heard a lot of things that were taking place in the community and might have read a lot of things online or as well in the newspaper that took place with that. He informed us also during that time, and again, I'm just providing the information. He also informed us at that time that there'll only be 2 options. That'll either be full in person or that you'll be full remote. That the hybrid education, and by the way, we've been providing an unbelievable opportunity and a high quality hybrid education, but that will no longer count for student learning time. So it would either be full in person or full remote. That he was tying that to our student learning time. And I'm just giving you information what he told us on this call. That as of April 5th, if we did not have students either in person or fully remote, that it wouldn't count towards a student learning time. And that time that was hybrid, if we didn't go with that direction, that time would have to be made up either on weekends, after school, or during the summer. So please understand, every month I have to produce a report that I submit to the Department of Education about student learning time. Exactly how many minutes we're doing in person, how many minutes we're hybrid, all of that. We provide a report every month. But all of that is going to start at a new point as of April 5th. Again, this was something that he is mandating for us if he gets permission from the Board of Education. That'll be mandated. That was a conversation we had with him on that Wednesday. This past Monday, the MASS, Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents, met with Mike Long, who's the attorney for superintendents in the entire state of Massachusetts. And he went over the process as well too, saying that once the commissioner gets the permission to mandate this, then that will be in place. There's not an option for us besides but to do this. The thing that was also tied to this that we heard on that meeting that we had on Monday with Mike Long was one of the things that could affect us if we did not follow this mandate is that he could tie to our Chapter 70 money. And that every day that we were not either fully in person or have a remote option, that 1/180th of our Chapter 70 money could be impacted as well too. And again, I'm just providing you information that was given to us. So we met with the commissioner. Yep, so 180 days of school, Chapter 70 money is tied to that. Every day that we're not fully in person or providing that type of instruction, that they could affect that Chapter 70 money. This is what was given, information that was told to us. So this is the information we're told. And so now April 5th is coming towards us. A month from tomorrow, if this mandate goes through, we need to be prepared and ready. So like I said, all this information I'm providing to you is what we've heard. We do not have a scheduled meeting with the commission. We're thinking that it's next Wednesday. Do not have that definitive of that's going to take place or a time that's taken place. But the work that we need to do as a school district is now between now and then. And I am not going to wait. And I think I've heard from you guys multiple times as a school committee that we're not going to wait. So what have we done in between in getting ready for that? So the first thing that we've done is that we have met with our principals in preparation and getting ready for this. This is a big change. And I'll use that word pivot, right? So the work that we've been doing so far, providing fully remote and hybrid, we've been doing a really good job on it. Our teachers have been working extremely hard on this. But for us to make that move, to be able to go back in person, it's going to take a lot of work for us to do that and get there at that point. Parents are going to have the option of being full remote, but also parents are going to have the option of being in person. The part I have a problem with, I'm trying to deal with as well too, is that all the time that we've done in terms of hybrid has count for student learning time. But as of April 5th, when that rolls around, the only time that will count will be if they're in person or remote. And so please appreciate that remote time still will count for student learning time. Parents could have that option of that, but any hybrid time will not count for student learning time. So it'll either be in person or fully remote. So what have we done so far? We've met with principals, we've met with directors. We're doing the work that we need to do in preparation for that. We gave a message out to the community that went out today that you might have seen it out to the HWEA and the Hwrsd that sort of gave an update of what we're hearing and where we're at this point. There's a lot of things you're seeing, a lot of things you're hearing, a lot of rumors that are online. We just wanted to make sure we gave the accurate information of what we have so far. The other part that's you're going to be seeing is tomorrow, our individual principals are going to be sending out, not a survey, I'm very careful about, but information gathering for our families. And what we're going to be asking for those families at that time is a couple things. If you are hybrid, do you want to return to 5 days a week in person? If you are fully remote, do you want to stay fully remote, or do you want to be able to come into 5 days a week? So we're going to be getting that information from families. One of the things I got to be honest with you that I did not think about, and our principals made me aware of it, is that people that are hybrid, that are 2 days a week, might want to not come in 5 days a week. They might want to go fully remote. So that's the information we're going to be gathering. Again, getting ourselves prepared and ready, because I can't wait for next Wednesday, if that's truly when the meeting is, and then we're a week less in getting ready for this. The other part we're doing is even logistical things, like our furniture. You know, we spent the entire summer moving furniture out to Memorial, into TWB. The custodians and the crew did an incredible job in terms of labeling everything and putting in everything in individual rooms based on where they came from the schools here. But all that needs to take place. So our principals are working with Ed Sanadello and Aaron and getting those things all together so they have a staging area so the furniture can at least be moved in to the schools and get them ready as well too. Again, just preparation and preparing and getting ready in advance. We're hearing that this is a mandate. We're hearing that this is going to be taking place. We've heard from the commissioner, but we haven't heard any more. And what I want to make sure is that we're ready for when this does take place, and that period of time that we have, which is getting less and less, that we're ready to have that take place. So again, communication is going to be going out, has gone out, and surveys, our information gathering will be going out to all of our families as well too, to get that information about what you want your child to be able to have for the remainder of the school year at K-5. Again, right now it's just K-5 that we're hearing. Conversation came up with the commissioner about that secondary level, but at this point it was put on the, I'll use the expression, back burner. There hasn't been anything definitive, and it hasn't been a timeline. My concern is, right, we all want in-person instruction. We know that's where we want to go, but we want to make sure we're doing it safely for our students, and we want to make sure that we're doing it safely for our staff. The timeline is getting shorter and shorter. I appreciate if the commission might have said to us in January, start looking at this and getting ready for this. But here he is in less than a month and telling us that we need to make this move. We just want to make sure we're prepared and we're ready. If this doesn't come to the point that it does, and it doesn't give him the permission from the Board of Education, he doesn't mandate that, then we're continue the work that we're doing, keeping our kids at that 6 feet social distancing and continue moving forward. If the mandate does come, I want to make sure we're doing it safely, and I want to make sure that I'm not putting our district in an opportunity that we're going to either have to be called on our student learning time or be called financial consequences for it as well too. What else do I have to tell you? I know I gave you a lot of information there. Sorry about that. So other things that we're doing. We have a working group that we've been doing, meeting on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. That was part of the MOA that took place with the HWEA. So we've been meeting, we had a conversation with them today. I also reached out to Damien, the president of the HWEA, to get some official dates for our negotiation team to get together. We're looking at possibly not next week, because next week's a busy week for all of us with budget, but the following week to get those locked up as well too. Again, all in preparation, all being prepared in case we need to move forward on this. If it's a mandate, we don't have an option but to do this. And what we need to do is work together as a community and make sure we're going to do it safely for our students and staff.
Hey, Al, can I jump in here for a sec? So is the Board of Education a rubber stamp for the commissioner, or are there thinkers on there that are going to look at this straight through? I'm just asking flat out. I don't know the answer.
So I can't imagine that the commissioner, and I can't speak for him, that publicly he would come out and say this without making sure that the Board of Education is going to support this. I don't know what's exactly going to take place tomorrow at 2:00. It's a public Zoom, so I'll be attending that as well too, to see exactly the type of conversation that takes place with the Board of Education and the commissioner. I think the biggest thing, Sean, I just want to make sure is that we're being proactive on this and not being reactive.
Now, we're talking just K-5 at this point?
At this point, it's just K-5. Secondary level was mentioned, and again, 30-minute conversation with the commissioner was mentioned, but no timeline set with that.
Wait, so the commissioner, did he talk to you about this beforehand? Did he ask for your opinions about this beforehand? Did he poll the superintendents in Massachusetts about this? Or is this something that he just kind of just decided?
So the questions that you're asking is many of my colleagues have asked as well too. This is concerning to us, right? So one of the questions that we asked him was that same exact one. He informed us that he pulled together 12 superintendents throughout the state and got the information. Honestly, Sean, you heard it at the exact same time that we as superintendents heard it. When that went out on live, when he had that press conference with the governor, we were hearing it for the first time as well too from him. So, I guess I just got to say, when I look at, and I know you guys have called me on this a little bit, I don't want to judge us to any other districts around us, but for this to take place, we're in a better spot for this to be able to take place if we have to mandate it and go in this direction. The work that our teachers have done, the work that our administrators have done, there's still a heck of a lot of work to do. Not going to be an easy thing to do in a short period of time for us to do it. And that's why we're moving forward and getting things in place now.
Yeah.
Other questions?
So
probably same questions I have as the superintendent.
It just reminds me, I think it was that Steve Jobs quote. I don't hire smart people to tell them what to do. I hire smart people for them to tell me what to do. And you have all these superintendents with far more experience than he has in education, especially when you accumulate them together, and business managers and assistant superintendents and such. Why isn't he asking you, the boots on the ground? I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I mean, I would love to get the kids back in place, but I mean, even working some kind of transition, like, you're not on this day you have to be there, but maybe give you the month to say, transition by the end of April or something. I don't understand these draconian mandates that he's sending out there, that this is how it's going to be, or we're going to take your money away. I mean, this just sounds ridiculous from a commissioner that I think has been very unimpressive. He came in really strong and amazing, but he just seems to have been a flash in the pan. I mean, I like, again, I'm not against this, getting all the K-5 back. I think it's a good idea, but how he's handling it and how he's treating the lack of respect and with the other superintendents, I'm shocked. I mean, come on, get you work for us. We don't work for you. Come on, Commissioner.
So many superintendents, myself included, were very concerned in how we heard it and how we found out about it. And again, I think that's the reason why we brought Mike Long, the attorney for MASS, into this conversation that we had on Monday, because we want to make sure that we're doing this the right thing. But again, if this is something that's being mandated, and we'll know more about that tomorrow, I just need to make sure by legally that we're ready for that, and that I'm not putting our district in any jeopardy. But at the same time, keeping our teachers and students safe as well too.
Al, two quick questions on that. So,
Patrick, do you have a comment?
yeah, two quick questions. So if we look at the vaccine information, right, it just came out, and starting, I think it is the 11th. So if we were to have everybody vaccinated on the 11th, their next, if they had one of the 2-shot vaccinations, the next vaccination date would be April 1st, and then they're basically teaching that following Monday. Is there any conversation, or has there been, about accelerating what that looks like so that people have the ability to have 2 vaccines prior to the 5th, or a surplus of the Johnson & Johnson vaccines so that people don't have to have the 2 prior to the 5th? And then the second question has to do with pool testing. So if we look at the extension, I believe, and I may be off a little bit, the extension now where the state will pay for the pool testing is only like 2 weeks after the kids go back to school. So is there any conversation about extending that well into May, so that we've got greater safety levels in place for people.
And by the way, if I could just jump in, one comment is that after you get your second vaccine, it's 2 weeks after that is when you're covered. You know, it's not right after you get the shot. You've heard people who got their shot and they catch the virus. The virus is already in you. You need 2 weeks after the last shot.
So answer to your question. So a couple of things we've been providing, and I'm not sure if I CC'd school committee on that, providing information to our staff about the vaccinations. I've been on the line with one of our parents who works for CVS as well too. So we've been able to provide that information to our staff as well too. You know, the CVS is providing the vaccination. There's 3 locations that are right in our area. But my final conversation with them, and again, it's great, and we want our teachers to be vaccinated, but they're getting 200 per store per week, 200 vaccinations per store per week. So that's not a lot of vaccinations. The other hard part for us for this is our teachers are lumped in that phase 2 category of people that are 65, and you're probably seeing online that people that are in that age 65 category are not getting their vaccination as well too. So it's being very difficult for all people to get vaccinated. One of the things, and we want our teachers to get vaccinated, we know the importance of that. So one of the things that we've realized as a district is what we're hearing from Terry Brand and our nurses, that second vaccination is on that second day is where people are not feeling well. And we're, you know, we want people to get vaccinated. We want people to stay home and get well to be able to come back to work. So one of the things that we are doing is that we just need them to let us know that, and then we're not counting that as a sick day for them. We're giving them that opportunity to be able to stay home and get well with that, because we know there's some consequences after the second vaccination. So yeah, you know, so I know it's very difficult for people to get the vaccinations. I know that I've heard from people today that they were in a group of 1,000 people online. We didn't get the vaccination, but then I heard from a couple teachers, because I sent some information out, that were able to grab the CVS this morning. It wasn't the Johnson & Johnson, it was the Moderna one they were able to grab. So that's good news. But we're pushing that information out to our staff so that they are aware of it. But it's there's not enough vaccinations certainly coming in, as we know, across the entire country, never mind into our community as well too. The other part that I think I've shared with you in the past is that we're going to do one at TWB. I spent a lot of time in meetings, myself and Terry and Jill Constellino. That's been put on hold as well for our community, because the main sites they're going to be doing that at is at the mall and at CVS's right now as well too. Did that answer your question, Patrick, in terms of vaccination, or did I just give information, not answer your question on that one?
It sounds like they didn't share any additional information from a vaccination standpoint or pool testing, which was the second part. It sounds like pretty minimal information about extending the funding for that beyond the whatever it is, April 18th.
I got to tell you, I got more information from a wonderful parent in our community who works for CVS, and that's the information I've been sharing out with our family. So I truly appreciate it. I'm just not saying his name because I want to make sure I'm respectful of the information he's given me, but we're getting that out to our staff as well too.
So Al, I do have a question. I'm curious, is there going to be any repercussion at the grade 6 through 12 level if there is hybrid that's still going on? Is that not counting as time on learning? I mean, how does that look? And then the other question of that too was transportation. I mean, obviously you've been in touch with LPDEC to make sure, but I mean, are we going to have to add buses? Are we going to be able to have more children on the bus? I mean, what does that also look like?
So a couple things. So they've I don't want to say loosened, but they've lessened the restrictions for transportation. So they're able to sit closer together.
Who has done that, Al?
The Department of Education has lessened their restrictions. There were certain requirements that they had to be.
Are they a branch of the CDC, Al? Are they a part of the CDC or are they?
Nope. They're not.
So they're not medical experts, they're education experts, but they're making medical decisions here?
Certainly part of the conversation that we've been having, Sean, in terms of superintendent's decisions that are being made. Again, I can't stress enough, the work that our teachers have been doing, the work that our community has been doing has been outstanding in terms of keeping our kids and our staff safe.
Yeah, you have done a great
job. What we've been doing has been working, as we can see, and Terry and I have had these conversations, and Misty have multiple about the work and how we've been keeping our staff and students safe. But if this is a mandate, I need to make sure that I'm prepared for that. So one of the things that they have done is they've lessened the restrictions in terms of transportation. We, as Lower Pioneer Valley superintendents, I host a meeting every Friday that we're working to see what this is going to look like, not only for Hampden, Wilbraham, but my colleagues in the area around us as well too, because we share those buses and transportation. So that is part of a conversation. Time on learning is a very interesting thing, Mara. So there's the questions that I have. Like, so my part is, so hybrid education up until April 5th counted for time on learning, but after April 5th, it doesn't count for time on learning. These are just questions I have, but yet fully remote is going to count for time on learning if a parent chooses to be fully remote. And that's an option we're going to give for the remainder of the year. The second question I have is, if we're bringing our students back and there's a positive case, I'm going to have to quarantine more kids. And so those students are going to have to be remote. So that's things that we need to think of in terms of staffing as well too, especially at the K, the 1 and the 2. And that time on learning is going to count, but yet hybrid time on learning is not going to count. So those are the questions that I have as a superintendent that I want to know from the commissioner as well too. The other part, and the biggest thing, and it sounds so trivial here, but you have 500 superintendents on a call, and our number one concern, and it's a concern for my principals as well too, is lunches. How are we going to provide lunches? Because right now we say the 6 feet apart, mask off, they can have their lunches. We're supposedly going to get additional guidance on that because that's a huge piece for us, right? So not only just getting our kids in safe, keeping our students safe, keeping our staff safe, but how are we going to feed them and making sure that we do that safely because they're going to have their mask off. So that's the part that we're waiting for further guidance on, but that's a huge piece. I know it sounds small, but it is a big piece that we have to be able to make sure we have in place. Supposedly Wednesday, we're going to get further information on that. And he's told us that. The other piece that I've talked to Ed about, Ed Senadella, and we use them in the fall and are ready to use them if principals need them, is that we provided tents. You might have seen those at Wilbraham Middle and some of our schools in the past, that the kids can have lunch outdoors in the spring weather and things like that. So facility-wise, we're working on that as well too. That answer your questions?
Yes.
And again, these are all questions that we're getting answers to or don't get answers to, and I'm still trying to make sure that I have all accountable for us.
I mean, we talked about K through 5 going back to school and not allowing for the hybrid, but I don't understand why. Can you mute your thing, please? I don't understand giving you the information at the high school level, the middle school and the high school level, because now that still allows for hybrid unless you have to stop at the K through 12 level and there's no more hybrid at all, right?
So I look at also at the secondary level. So I'll just take the high school and my seniors. So we haven't got any information, about secondary, but I also look at April 5th as the start date for elementary. I also look at April vacations in that time. And then I also look at our seniors who are and our high school kids who are going to be in finals, and our seniors that are going to be graduating even earlier. Like, how do I implement that? I'd have to be, so a couple things, right? I think you've heard me say that April 1st deadline. Every conversation we've had with the commissioner throughout this entire year, somehow that date has just sort of been popped up. And I've said to my colleagues over and over again, it's that April date, I'm telling you, and everyone's been saying to me, that's not true. All along I've heard that. I'd be foolish to think as a superintendent that MCAS is not tied into this, right? So all of a sudden now we're coming back, right? April 1st, and we still haven't heard about MCAS, exactly how that's going to take place remotely, exactly how it's going to take place in person. The schedule's been a little expanded, and this is just me speaking freely here publicly, obviously, but I'd be foolish to think that that's not somehow tied into that as well too. No further information yet. This is just the things that I'm thinking about in preparation.
No, I love the idea that we're going to get our kids to come back, and that we're not going to be handcuffed on there. But for we should decide how to do that, because we have certain guidelines that we put in place. Like you said, when the kids are eating, we need 6 feet apart, but for them to just say, well, this is how you're going to do it, just deal with it. Didn't Dr. Bontempi bring up at the last meeting the lawsuits and stuff like that? Is Massachusetts gonna hold us harmless and take the heat for that? Did they reach out to the CDC to see if there was some way that they would allow this for K through 5? So on one side, I'm so happy that we're going to get our kids back in full-time in-person or full-time remote education, but the way that they're doing this just seems really suspect to me. I don't get it.
So the one thing that came up was a conversation about the liability, right? And so that's a question we asked Mike Long, the attorney for superintendents. And if this is a mandate from the commissioner, mandated from the state, then that's the umbrella of protecting us. Of course, anyone can get sued at any time. A district can get sued. We have a lot of lawsuits that are going on right now. But that if it's mandated, that's a whole different perspective. Along those same lines, you know, the MTA president was on the news the other day, and it was very interesting what she said, and I couldn't agree with her more. Is she said the commissioner just sort of waving his magic wand and saying, okay, April 5th, this is going to be taking place. And I'm not talking disrespectfully about my commissioner of education, but this work that needs to be done. And just when we were in a spot that we're moving along, and again, 8 weeks of school, and there's a lot of time left. There's still that's a short period of time to make these big changes that we spent June, July, and August and getting preparation and prepared for as well too.
Al, I would suggest that if the time comes that we have to move furniture, by all means, invite him to come and help.
Terry, you still on this call? Could you just talk I know we had that working group this afternoon. Could you just talk a little bit about that? The attached letter that the commissioner had in his update from some health profession. Can you just give us a little update about to the school committee and the community about that as well too? Sorry to put you on the spot there.
Sure. So when he issued the on the desktop notice about his announcement and his directive around the K-5 return, there was an additional document that was a letter from pediatricians across the state, epidemiologists, public health experts, and they did give some kind of agreement that as long as the other mitigation strategies, safety strategies were strictly adhered to, that reducing the distance at these grade levels in the school setting, would be permissible, I guess is the term that they used. But that is a readily available document. I'm probably not giving it justice to all the details that were in there, but it was only like a one pager, but it had several signatures with it.
Terry, can I ask you, do you see a way that this is going to work? That we can bring the kids in, we can bring them back safely, that we can keep socially distanced guidelines in place, that we can keep the masks in place? I mean, I really want this to happen. We need this to happen, but we have to do it right. Do you see a path?
Well, I think everybody's committed to trying to work out the details to do this in a safe manner. I would have to say that I would prefer to see this happen in the fall. Everybody come back in a robust fashion, because by then the vaccination will have occurred. Teachers will definitely have been vaccinated. General community, the large amount of public, anybody who wants to be vaccinated will be vaccinated, and that will help keep the infection rates down on the whole, which would greatly benefit the school environment. So that would be my preference. But if we have to do this, I think we just have to work through all the details, like Al said, and we have to problem solve. We have to get additional information. I do think the snack and the lunch are going to be a big challenge, because masks off, we want to maintain that 6 feet. And the other thing I think is, if we have to reduce to 3 feet to fit our students in a classroom, we want to analyze each classroom individually and maximize space wherever we can. If we have a little bit of space, separate the kids out a little bit more, and also keep our teachers' instructional space 6 feet from the first closest student to the extent possible. I think these are all things that we're working hard together to, brainstorm and problem solve around.
And again, please appreciate, it was a little over a week ago that we heard this for the first time, right? So I'm just sharing with you the information that I know. And again, I know there's a lot of conversation going on out there publicly as well. And that's why I felt it was important to get that communication out to you guys today about literally where we're at and what's taking place, and the knowledge that I know and the work that we're doing in terms of preparation for this.
Al, one other quick question. So the survey that you referenced,
I'm not calling it a survey. No, I'm not calling
the data gathering, whatever you're going to call it. Information gathering. So I would guess that you've got 3 buckets. People that are like, heck, yep, my kid back to school, not a chance, I'm keeping them. And then there's a middle bucket that's saying, I want to see what this looks like. When will people be able to understand what that looks like, as Terry just spoke about lunch and snack and some of those things that I'm guessing some people will need to make the decision that they want. And obviously data wise, probably want to understand what that looks like, because depending upon the number of people that say I'm not returning could sway some of those things significantly. So when's that going to be that people can understand what it would look like in order to make the decision that's best for their family and for their learner?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like that lunch piece is a huge piece, right? And how that's going to look. Right now, what we know is that we're going to, that 6 feet that we've sort of kept as our CDC guidelines, that we're now going to look at that 3 feet to 6 feet distancing. So it's going to be a little less than that. We know we're going to be able to provide, transportation because they're less than the restrictions on that. At the same time, Patrick, I need to know of what families are thinking at the same exact time, because that's going to impact how many kids are actually going to be in that classroom, right? And how many kids I need to make sure that I have the transportation for, or how much room I'm going to need in the cafeteria, how many desks I got to bring over from Memorial over to the schools and stuff. So my principals have done a great job. They created this information gathering thing that they're going to send out tomorrow. They didn't want to wait even any longer, so we can at least start looking at what that looks like.
Is there a way, Al, that we can make sure that maybe there needs to be a robocall so parents know that they all need to see, look for, and get this? I mean, not even just put it on the website that there's a link or something where they have to get to wherever that survey is, because at this point you want to get as many people to respond as you possibly can.
So yes, so lesson learned, right? So I think one of the things Sean Kennedy said over and over again, okay, we got to talk about what we did right and what we didn't do so right during the pandemic of education. So one of the things that we learned is information gathering here, right? So again, that's why we're not calling it a survey. And we're sending this out right away. We're getting the information, and we're making sure that everyone, we got to get responses from people. And we're going to send the connected message out. That's why that information went out tonight first to families. The survey is going to go out, and what we're doing instead of doing the survey out from the district, it's going out by individual schools. So this way they can maintain and control that and seeing the responses they're getting back. And it's going to be, and I have to be able to say this, and that's part of you'll get that information tomorrow. It's per school, per student. So, because we have to take into account that families might be thinking differently. Like my 5th grader, I might want to keep fully remote, but yet my 2nd grader, and these are situations that are happening in our district, I want him to go into my 2nd grader or my kindergarten, I want him 5 days a week, right? So we need parents to fill this out. All that's in the information gathering information that we're sending out, and also will be in the Connect Ed that I'll be sending out as well too.
But to Patrick's point, is there going to be the option of those folks that are going to want to wait to see? I mean, obviously you don't want to have the majority of the parents say they want to wait to see. You kind of want an A or a B, but understanding that you're going to have people who are going to sway their vote, and like, when would the last date for them to make their decision? Is that going to be noted to them to share with the principal?
Yep. So what our principals and myself and directors have decided that we're looking at all next week. We're hoping by Friday we'll have everybody's information back, so that we can start making some decisions. Again, this might not, because if you look at where we're at next Friday, that is, I'm sorry, my calendar, the 12th. So we're short of, we got to prepare for this. Again, this might not all come to reality, but on the other hand, I don't want you guys saying to me 2 weeks from now, like, where are you, Al? And what has happened here? So we have to start gathering some of this information, but it's going to be at the individual school level. So those are the conversations that if things need to change, that's not happening at that large district level, but it's going to be happening with the Mrs. Curtins, the Miss Danglisses, the Miss Mobergs.
Are there any other questions before we move on to Aaron's wonderful presentation?
Yeah, I just have
Thank you. I'll continue to keep the school committee, the community, and our teachers updated of what's taking place with this. Ever changing. Hopefully we'll get some more information on Wednesday, and if I do, I'll share that with you guys as well too. What I can say to parents, keep an eye tomorrow. There'll be a connected message that will go out, and fill out that information as soon as you can and get it back to our principals.
So we have Dr. Bontempi has a question, I think, and just a quick thing. So what if I change my mind after a couple of weeks? Is that going to be, that's something else you got to think. I want to go full remote now. No, I want to go full in person now. I mean, there's a lot.
We're going to look at those at individual school levels. We're really hoping that parents, for are going to commit to what they're hoping they're going to have.
Again, it's all about the spacing and making sure we have enough, the desk and everything we need to have. And again, there's 8 weeks left of school as well too, once this rolls in.
So just to let you know, in Springfield, so we did surveys, and the parents had to choose between fully remote or coming back to school. And we've asked for, in Springfield, a waiver to do it graduated, not to do it on the 5th, everybody in. But our parents, whatever choice they make, they must adhere to that. They cannot change. I believe our cutoff date is March 12th. So you have until then to decide exactly what you're doing for every single child. And that's how it will remain until the end of the year. So
Yes, I would like the same thing for the Hampden Wilbraham Regional School District. I know there might be a circumstance here or there, but we're really asking people to commit so we can get this in place as well.
yeah, you need to, because for planning purposes, I've got 23 kids and even 3 feet apart, I'm not sure. And we've been told we're eating in our classrooms. So yeah, I'm not excited about that, but it is what it is.
I just hope I gave justice to like the work that's been done so far in our district, and this is going to be a monumental task for us to get this done in a short period of time. And again, I just can't stress enough the work that our teachers are going to have to do and our principals and directors in a short period of time. But we're trying to be proactive instead of reactive. Did Bill have a question? You said, Sean. I'm sorry.
I thought
Bill, are you here? Do you have a question?
Then I turn it over to Aaron or Mara. Sorry. Thanks, everybody.
No, that's fine. We'll let Aaron, it's Aaron's turn.
Alrighty then. I am just going to pull up a presentation to share. So everybody can hear me? We're good? Okay. So this is a preliminary presentation. This has been a work in progress over a couple months putting together to share with everyone. I think some of the folks who attend the Finance and Operations Subcommittee meetings have seen at least part or most of this. The first thing I'd like to do, this is, you will become privy to some factors that make this an extremely challenging budget year between the towns. You'll hear about minimum local contribution, which is something you don't frequently hear about, but it had a great impact this year on the budget, with a tremendous amount of the budget moving towards Wilbraham, more than has happened in the past. I do want to say we have had some wonderful champions from the Finance Committee, folks who show up very frequently from Wilbraham. Mark Ducey and Peter Dufresne are frequently at every meeting. They're very supportive. And on the Hampden side, Doug Boyd and Carol Fitzgerald have been at every meeting. They've been very supportive. We've met with both the Wilbraham Finance Committee and the Hampden Advisory. I also want to share that I received message that last night, despite the challenging nature of this budget, the Wilbraham Finance Committee did vote to support this budget. So I'm very happy to hear that. Was very happy to hear that today, and it's a testament to their confidence in the things that the schools are doing. So the very first thing I wanted to get into is some folks have been privy to this, and I think it's a good opportunity to share it with the entire committee and maybe the public. So one of the challenges for this year's budget, I think we know that numbers have been skewing towards Wilbraham for a number of years. So what used to be a 75-25 split between the two towns is now more like an 80-20% split between the two towns. So that's driven a lot of the cost of running the school district towards Wilbraham. This year, there was also an odd spike in what's called minimum local contribution. And no fault of anyone for not knowing what that is. It's relatively obscure. It is the minimum amount each town must pay in contribution towards a regional school district. So if you think of, some people are maybe more familiar with minimum net school spending, which is the minimum amount where we need to spend on our schools. This feeds into that. So by the formula that we utilize, each town pays that minimum local contribution first, and then they split the remaining funds. So what happened this year, however, is that Hamden's minimum local contribution dropped significantly. So the remaining funds, those remaining funds separate from the minimum local contribution, fell into that shared fund. So what was once covered 100% by Hamden is now split 80% Wilbraham, 20% Hamden. So what I've prepared is I've prepared 2 quick slides that sort of explain that, exactly what happened. So Wilbraham's minimum local contribution dropped a very small bit. It dropped $13,000. So from 2021 to 2022, you can see it went from $16,700,000 to $16,687,000 roughly. Hamden's, however, dropped $269,672 from $5,458,000 to $5,188,000. So in all, $283,000 has moved from the minimum local contribution that each town pays first into this pool of money that's split. So the impact of this is felt in that split. So that 283,000 is then absorbed by the towns at $226,489 for Wilbraham and $56,622 by Hamden. So sort of putting the net out and the net in together, Wilbraham has to pick up $226,489 additional dollars in exchange for $13,000 that their minimum local contribution dropped. So they have a $213,000 net increase, net increase to their share before we do anything else, before anything else happens at all. Their share is going up $213,000. On the Hamden side, the opposite happens. And before a single split happens, before anything happens, Hamden's share drops by 213,000. So that's basically our starting place this year, right? The whole split, everything we put into this, whatever increase we're going to deal with, starts at that variance, that challenge. So then as we start getting into our budget, some of the very first things we look at is, what are our priorities? What are the most important things to us as a school district? What do we want to get done? What are the things that if we lose, we're going to be very sad to lose, that we're going to, not want to continue without. So some of the things community-wide. So I separated this into some community-wide priorities that I believe have existed. These were here, and in speaking with Al, they also seem to be some items that we would prioritize within the community. So continuing the vision and commitment to excellence, right? So, we want to maintain the excellent teaching that's going on, whether it's hybrid, whether it's in person. We want to hire and retain excellent teachers. We want to bring in great people. We want to prioritize strategies and programs with proven cost effectiveness. So we want to look at the things we're doing and figure out what's cost effective. That's a practice that we're doing very regularly in our administrative team meetings. You'll see some evidence in that as we go along. Recognize student class sizes, right? So, any sort of big cuts in teaching is going to result in growth in class sizes. So we really want to prioritize keeping teachers in classrooms, adults in classrooms, so we can have class sizes. And also work with the towns and make sure that we have manageable assessments. All things that we felt made a lot of sense and were worth keeping. This year, we had a conversation with our administrative team that included all of the principals in February, and we said, what are the very specific budget priorities for this year? In particular, we're coming into COVID. We're still working on maybe a district-wide strategic plan. what should our specific budget priorities as a district be? What are those things that we want to hang on to? Absolutely, number one, every single person said, we want to continue the technology gains we've made. So we've put technology in students' hands. We want to keep that technology in those students' hands. We want that technology to work, and we want to be able to utilize it effectively. So we want to do that. The second was student social emotional well-being. In particular, this year, we're bringing back students who are going to be in a whole myriad of settings. Some of them are fully remote. Some of them are hybrid. Um, some of them, when they come back next year, will have spent a year at a private school. They may have spent a year homeschooled. Our homeschool numbers went up extraordinarily. We also will have some students who will come back from some of the virtual schools. So in all of this, we've had a number of students who are going to be in a wide range of situations. We also know that the social emotional uh, baggage that comes from not being in school, not being among their friends, not having teachers, things like that. Some of them home alone for long periods of time, right? Mom and dad have to work, things like that, the reality. So we really wanted to focus on that and prioritize that. We also want to prioritize closing the COVID achievement gaps. We know, again, that same range of social emotional gaps are going to exist in academic achievement, right? So whether it's MCAS or whatever method you choose to measure students academically, we know those gaps are going to be much wider than they usually are, right? We've lost the consistency that we usually have. And then finally, we want to start continuing the discussion and expanding the discussion on equity. So how do we make sure that we provide an equitable environment to all students? So those were really the four absolute top priorities we came away from that meeting with, and we've been talking about as we develop this budget going forward. So what's our proposed budget when we get to the brass tacks? We spent a lot of time sharpening our pencils, narrowing everything we can. This is a very long process of sitting down with every one of the principals and every one of the department heads at least twice individually, and then a couple separate times as a group. We get together and talk about, again, what are our priorities? What are those things we want to keep? How do we keep those things? How do we maintain those things? So as we sharpen the pencil, we always start high and start bringing things down. There are a lot of inputs. We start with salaries, then we move into the other budget inputs, which get into health insurance, which get into retirement benefits, things like that, that all sort of fit into the big pot. So we've managed to narrow it down to this point to an increase of about 2%. That's where we think we can be this year, doing our very best to manage assessments to the towns and make sure that we maintain a level service budget minimally. You will see we are making a single strategic swap, and that single strategic swap is designed to maintain that number one priority. Remember that number one priority was maintaining the technology advances that we've made. So you will see that we've swapped a position out that we think makes sense in the context of living to those strategic goals, right? What are those strategic items? So in our budget, we have a number of items that are quite honestly just obligatory cost increases, right? These are cost increases that it either we can't get away from, period, or it would be very challenging to get away from, right? It would change our strategic outlook if we were to change some of these things drastically. Health insurance, right? Health insurance is going up for everyone every year. We actually had a fairly good year, all told. $365,000 is not that extraordinary an increase. It's modest. A big factor of that was our retiree health insurance went up by very, very little. They managed to keep retiree health insurance low. Hamden County retirement, this is a pretty typical increase for a retirement program. I think some of us have heard a little bit in the news about Hamden County retirement. I can't speak to any of that, but I believe the funds in that account are secure, so there's no real concerns there. Again, very typical. Many of our staff are on contracts, very specific contracts, and our contractual increases through steps, through longevity, through normal increases, less some say retirements, things like that, comes to $868,000. Pretty much in line with what it's been in past years, so it's not an extraordinarily high year, not an extraordinarily low year. Transportation is on the low side. And in fact, we actually also have a transportation credit that we'll be seeing in the next slide. But this is a pretty good increase. I think last year was over 150,000 anticipated. So this comes in pretty good. And I think some of it does have to do with the fact that the end of last year and this year, a lot of the busing was reduced. So because we work with a collaborative, they smooth some of the costs out over time. So instead of getting one big decrease, we get to see some of the increases, the increases not increase as much over time. So they use things similar to us, like E&D, to manage costs. So when they have some savings, it might go into E&D or their reserve account that then helps balance budgets out in the long run. So, again, while we may not see huge benefits in one year, we get to take those benefits a little bit more over time, which I think is helpful. So our total, again, relative to our total budget increase, this is 500,000 more than our total budget increase. So then we get to talk about some places where we do have some savings, or in this budget year, we have some offsets. So we do have the transportation credits. That is a one-year credit, but knowing that at least for the next few years, I think we're going to have pretty reasonable transportation increases. I'm pretty comfortable taking that credit next year and applying it into the budget. So that's $150,000 of savings. We do have some savings in out-of-district placements. So our total cost of out-of-district placements is dropping next year. That's a testament to some of the programs that Gina Roy has added. We have some life skills programs that are at Burgess right now that are very cost effective relative to where some of those students have been placed out in the past. So I think of building a program as an investment. We can't instantly bring back all of the students we want to bring back, but over a number of years, two things are going to happen. We are going to place fewer students in out of district placements, and we may be able to bring a few students back. So this could be the net result of a student aging out and us not having to put a student in and out of district placement. So again, when you develop these programs, they cost money up front, but the long-term savings for them can be really helpful if you have the density, right? If you have only one student, it's very hard to develop a program based on one student. So you're much better off putting them in an out-of-district placement, possibly, rather than developing a program. But once you start amassing, say, 5 students that you can serve, you make that very cost-effective. And this gets into that, developing cost-effective programming that we talked about in that earlier slide, right? How do we develop programs that bring cost-effectiveness? We are using some of our ESSER 2 grant. So we have another COVID-related grant that will be used to offset some costs this year. That is actually a grant that will go through 2023. And we do expect there will be more grant funding coming. So given that's a couple of years, I think we're comfortable using that as an offset and calling that budget support that will not just go for 1 year, it will go potentially multiple years. We'll use that. We have 2 grants that have increased, our Title I and our IDEA grant. Our IDEA grant is a special education grant. Our Title I grant supports interventions for struggling students, particularly low-income students. Both of those, I think one of the things we do have to realize is when those grants increase, it's an indicator that our costs in those areas are increasing, right? So our being able to keep some of those costs down while those grants go up, I think is again a testament to some of the work being done by folks like Gina Roy in keeping those students in and managing them properly. Finally, we do have a small, when you measure out last year versus this year, total FTE. We have a very small reduction of 1.26 FTE full-time equivalents. This isn't a cut. It's just sort of what happened as we shook things out, right? So we looked at how many paraprofessionals we're going to need next year, how many people in various positions. This isn't a result of any sort of RIF or cutting people's jobs. It's just normal shakeout. So, you know, there may be a year where we may find we need an additional para, and we'll have to find a way to work that into the budget. This just so happens that we have the benefit of not needing some positions that we won't have to replace. We do have some vacant positions in these areas, as we've talked about before. So again, no one's going to lose their jobs over this. So some of the key budget provisions that go into this budget. One of the things that we're going to do, and I've agreed to try to support, is that we are going to use that ESSER 2 grant partly to support the one-to-one initiative for 2 more years. So in 2022 and 2023 for devices, we will have those devices paid for by the ESSER grant. So I have put the equivalent to 300 Chromebooks in each of those 2 years. Embedded within our budget is the ability to buy some number of additional devices because we have been recycling through devices over the course of years. We've had carts and technology in classrooms. So I believe that given the large number we've bought this year and continuing to support that in the next few years, we can maintain that for a few years. And at that point, we need to use this time to plan. If we really want to keep this, we need to plan how we're really going to keep this, right? We may need to make some hard decisions about, you know, what's more important. So, you know, we felt like this was a way to keep these items off the budget for now and start working out how we're going to embed this in the budget over time. It's not a true long-term answer, and it does kick the can down the road a little bit, but we're in a really challenging place with COVID and coming back to school. And I think kicking the can down the road a little bit is what we need, more so than trying to jump right in and say that we're going to support this in our budget tomorrow, right, at next year. And if we're committed to it, we're still going to make that commitment. We're just going to have 2 years to make that commitment rather than 3 months at this point. One of the things we're doing is knowing that we have this many devices. We've talked a number of times about technology support. We have to support that technology. If we don't, we're going to fail. So last year, there was a fairly significant increase in the budget to ELL support. In looking at the numbers and talking to Julie Keefe, it seems like we definitely need some of that increase, but we can take some of that increase in staff and put it towards some additional tech support. We also have some central office savings that in talking to Al in the central office, we are willing to put a share of that towards additional technology support. So with those 2 items together, we think that can support an additional district-wide technology person. We're talking about exactly what that role would be, what that would look like. And Bill Powers and I are meeting regularly to discuss exactly what that department will look like in the long run, right? If we add that position. Right now, we are situated by school and we have a pretty good spread of staff across those schools. So how do we then embed another body into that mix, and how does that role fit in with the existing staff? So the other thing is, as I've shared, we have used a little bit of grant and credit support to keep the budget at 2%. Again, this is to help with that minimum local contribution that we do believe will hopefully level off. This helps us address the budget, keep the budget where it needs to be for Wilbraham, while keeping the programs and the supports in place that we need. Finally, next year, the intent is to use some of the grant funds to support interventions, social, emotional, equity, and efficiency practices. So some of that is we will be looking to add some interventionist positions. Again, that student learning gap we're talking about, we need to find a way to close that gap. And the best way to do that is put teachers in front of kids in an intervention setting. So we will do some assessment of students as we go into next year. We will have additional teachers, say on one-year contracts, who will be able to provide those services. We are also working on a summer program, an expansive summer program. So we have a normal special education summer program. We are hoping to add a supportive regular education summer program for students who may be struggling in either the remote or hybrid settings. We will additionally look to add some additional social emotional support. So that would be adjustment counselors district-wide. I believe we're also targeting some community outreach support to provide the link from families that might need in crisis or children who might need help with appropriate resources in the community. Some of the efficiency items are items that will allow us to make use of those savings in the central office as well and embrace them. And also be ready for the next situation where we have to be out of the office. I think, you know, things like that, disaster recovery have become very, very real for us. And we need to start thinking about how we can function if we can't be in the office for a period of time. Or if something were to happen to the office, right? We have files, we have processes that really depend on moving paper. And we need to start trying to move away from that. So we're looking at some opportunities to create some efficiencies in the long run. Sean, you okay over there?
I just feel bad for Al that we're not going to be killing as many trees as we've been killing.
Yes.
So
Yes, there'll just be more to hug though, Sean. So Al will be happy. So as we move into this, I think it's really important to touch on student enrollment and how this impacts our budget and it impacts some of the challenges that we have. So one of the things we've seen over a number of years is that our Chapter 70 funding is incredibly stagnant, right? Chapter 70 is very much a function of the number of students you have. However, embedded in the Chapter 70 formula is also a hold harmless provision. So the challenges with many schools in Western Mass, for many years, we have seen declining enrollments, which means effectively a 0% increase to Chapter 70. We get annually a per student increase that's roughly equivalent to a 0.5%. So that Chapter 70 increase doesn't keep up with inflation over time. So as people talk about, well, why can't you just cut your budget based on the reduction in students? Well, we're getting a declining value of that Chapter 70 as well. And if you look at this graph, you'll also see a situation. So that 0% line is at 3,800 students. So in 2007, this district had about 3,800 students. I think as Al shared today, we have a little under 2,900. So that's a pretty significant drop off in number of students. And one of the things I frequently hear people in the community talk about is, you know, I wish we only had more students and then we get more Chapter 70. The challenge is if you look at the distance between those two lines, that's how many more students we need to get a dime of additional Chapter 70 money. So we would need 1,000 more students to even imagine we were going to receive anything more in Chapter 70. So this is the precipitous challenge that many Western Mass schools are in, we could see an upswing in students, but that upswing in students is not going to mean any more funding for a long, long time. And as added costs on our budgets, like special education and things like that, that routinely go up by large increments, it further challenges our budgets in Western Massachusetts. It's just the reality of the situation we're in. Eastern Mass schools have sort of the opposite challenge. They do get more Chapter 70, but they can't build space fast enough in some cases. There are many, so whereas we struggle with charter schools in Western Mass, there are many Eastern Mass schools that don't mind charter schools at all, because otherwise they'd have to build new buildings. So it's, you know, it's different challenges for different areas. I would argue that our challenges may be a little more severe than that, and it's persistent. So how it impacts the towns, this shift in enrollment. So I talked about, and I won't spend a lot of time on this slide, but in 6 years, the shift between towns has shifted from 75%, 25% to 80%, 20%. And that's a significant gap. When you talk about adding that to normal increases, it means that every single year along that path, Wilbraham's pickup is increasingly more every year. Now, again, it could swing in the other direction, and then Hamden could be facing the same thing. So these student swings are also a big challenge. And one of the other challenges embedded in our regional agreement is that we use a single year number. Many other regional schools use a 5-year moving average. So it sort of stretches out the impact. Doing it all in a single year means you're feeling that full impact every single year of that shift. Any change in students, you're feeling immediately. Now, some people would say, well, that's great. Then next year, maybe I'll have a drop. But, you know, you lose that smoothing effect. So how do revenues impact our budget? So we have revenues. These are non-assessment, town assessment revenues. So as you'll see, we get Chapter 70, we get transportation aid, we have some net choice and charter, we have some grants that all come together to help support our budget. And if you look over the course of the past 4 years, those net the equivalent to 0.01% increase average per year. So as our budget is increasing by 2% overall, this means the towns are having to support more and more. Now, realistically, I will say that choice and charter piece for fiscal 22 change is extreme, but that's a relatively small piece of the pie and everything. And I will say that fiscal 22 change in choice charter, the difference in choice and charter, is a direct result of the students who are going to the Mass Virtual Schools. So there's the Mass Virtual Academy and the TECA Academy. So I pulled all of the choice students who are going out to other schools versus this year and last year. And we have a significant net number of students opting into those virtual academies. We may get them back next year in fiscal 22. So we may get some of this back next year if those students should decide to come back. But right now, I have to plan according to what those numbers show. And so that's another sort of budgetary challenge we have, is that's become a larger expense for us on the expense side. So also when we talk about taking a few of the grant offsets and the one-time items like the credit from Lower Pioneer Valley, I also know that in some likelihood, we're going to get some of this money back down the road. So I'm willing to make some of those shifts, because this is going to be what could be a one-time expense, right? Or a 1 or 2 year expense if those students come back or they graduate and more students don't go out to virtual schools. It is a pretty consistent number year on year regularly for those virtual schools. So just a few takeaways. You know, again, those increases in IDA and Title I are increases in low income and special education populations that are traditionally higher cost to serve. Chapter 70, as I said, hold harmless. Those increases, so some of these very, very small increases count for more than 25% of our revenues. So when we have to factor in what we need to ask for from our towns and we roll that all together, the towns have to contribute more because the state is not keeping up with our normal inflation. So finally, again, we've held choice budget support largely because of the numbers. We've kept it at its prior level, assuming it will eventually come back to those levels. But that does draw a little bit from our choice account. We have a reasonable choice account, so I'm not scared about pulling an extra 50,000 more than we think we might bring in. But it's not, say, long-term sustainable. The hope is that that choice and some of those budget impacts normalize a little bit over time. So finally, a quick graph sort of sharing where those revenues come from. By and large, between the Wilbraham assessment, the Hamden assessment, and Chapter 70, that's the vast proportion, the vastly largest proportion of our funding. The other items kind of fall in there. We get a tiny bit of Medicaid. So now just very quickly to look at assessments. As I shared, Hamden's assessment is dropping in the next year. It's dropping fairly significantly. So that's very helpful to Hamden. But then when we get to Wilbraham, Wilbraham's looking at a net assessment of almost 4% increase. And that's where we're talking about this being a very challenged budget on the Wilbraham side. And we're very thankful to Wilbraham and the members of the Finance Committee for supporting this budget. This is a budget that is challenging for them and that other towns may have been unwilling to try to support. So finally, these are your assessments. These are the totals of the assessments to each town. So the prior slide was the changes. This is the actual assessment amounts. And the other night in Hamden, for the Hamden folks, you will note I had two separate numbers. One was 190,000 and one was the 183,000. And I said I'd get back to which that actually was, I thought. And so I did think wrong. It is the lower amount for Hamden. So Hamden's a bit of a winner in that one as well. I had a carryover of last year's debt assessment that I inadvertently didn't update. So that's it. Soup to nuts. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take them. Otherwise, this is really the budget I think we're going to present when it comes time to present the budget. And it sounds like we do have some support from the towns. So I would encourage the school committee when we do bring this forward to support the budget.
Any questions?
So Maura, if I could just say one thing. So,
Patrick.
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. I'll go after.
Oh, sorry. Thanks, Patrick. So I just want to say to reiterate what Aaron just said. You know, this budget, the way it is the work that our budget sub of Bill and Sean and Maura have done all along the way with our FinComs from both Hamden and Wilbraham. They've done really good work. So we, my first year here, we came and we didn't have this clear process that we've gone through. Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't say the work that Aaron's done this year as our new Director of Finance and Operation has been extraordinary and has done a great job with this as well too, in presenting this to towns, and even the way he presented it to us tonight. And I know some of us have heard this multiple times, and each time I think I'm learning a little bit more every time because we've been part of this budget sub process. But for our community and for the members that weren't part of it, it was really laid out in a way that we could understand. And for the people that are in the audience as well too, it's an understandable budget as well. So thanks to Aaron and the sub for that as well too. Sorry, Patrick.
You said what I was going to say, which was a huge thank you. Past 2 years, kind of a kick in the teeth, if you will, when we talked about the budget, and it's been about cuts and what isn't going to be there. What a marked difference this is. Thanks, Maura, Bill, Sean, Aaron, Christine, everybody that worked to put this together. Really nice job.
Thank you, Patrick.
Steal your thunder. Sorry about that. We're thinking the same way.
Any other questions? Seeing as there's none, we'll move on to subcommittee updates. Michelle for policy.
How I spend my day. So we are continuing to bring policies to the committee. These policies, it's a second reading. It's from November 12th. We will be meeting next Thursday on the 11th, and we will continue to go through, and as soon as we can bring them to you, we will for first readings. And if you have any questions, please ask.
So given the
Thank you,
ones,
Michelle.
given the ones that were provided in our packet as this being the second reading, do we have to take a vote on these?
You have to do 3.
Okay, I'm just double checking.
Yeah, you know, what we did was in order to speed some of those things that pertain to COVID, the mask and all that, it was kind of an executive decision to do it in the less than 3. You really need to do 3. So,
Okay,
okay.
thank you.
Mhm.
Any questions for Michelle? Seeing is none. We have budget finance subcommittee. Bill, do you have an update?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much. So just to reiterate what was said by Al and Patrick, I do have a list of thank yous, and I really need to start off by thanking Aaron for all of his diligent hard work on this. Made the process very smooth, very understandable. Second, and no less important, would be Mark Ducey, Pete Dufresne, Doug Boyd, Carol Fitzgerald. They are really the ones. I mean, I can't take credit for anything. I mean, they're the ones that have committed themselves to coming to the meetings every week. I think the system that we have in place is a model for districts around the state and around the country, having a collaborative approach to forming the budget. Keeping everybody in the loop and everybody informed is a crucial part of it. And they've been absolutely incredible. I applaud their perseverance, and most importantly, for Wilbraham to vote this budget with such an increase. I can't say thank you enough. I mean, that was a bitter pill to swallow with such a big increase. And I appreciate all the work that they're putting into it, the sacrifices that they're putting in, and to the other departments in town that may not be getting what it is that they're asking for in deference to making sure that we have a budget that sustains education in our district. So thank you to all of the people who may not have been completely sated in what they wanted to achieve out of the budget. But I want to thank those people, and I want to thank Sean and Maura for their dedication, for coming to the meetings. And like I said, I don't take much credit for it because it's a team effort. You know, putting together the budget, I like to think of it as, you know, it's kind of like running through a fun house. You know, I mean, there's constantly things that are being thrown in your face. So you walk down the hall and a little foam fist comes out and hit you in the face, and you know, you manage to dodge that, and then somebody throws a chair at you, and you manage that, and somebody comes out from behind a corner and scares you. You know, so there's always something in the budget. This year it was the MLC, the decrease in minimum local contribution, as I had, you know, as I said during the budget subcommittee meeting, this is not new. It's just we got hit with a pretty drastic decrease this year, and I know Howie had alluded to it last year that we were seeing minimum local contribution decreases.
Mhm. Yep.
For those school districts around the state that provide only minimum local contribution, to them it's a break. But for those of us who fund well above and beyond what MLC requires, you know, it takes more of a punch out of the taxpayer. And you know, if I'm in the vein of thank yous, the thank yous have to go also to the men and women, the families who provide the tax dollars, because without that money and without that commitment, we would not be able to put this budget together. So
Right.
There's a few things coming up I just wanted to go over. Number one is for fiscal year 21. We're still going to have some challenges, and we're going to have to work through those and help Aaron with sort of the decision-making tree on some of this stuff. Not to say that he's not capable of doing it, but we do have oversight of the budget. If we do return to school, there's going to be a shift in some funds, right? And we
Mhm.
have to look
Oh,
at
yeah.
how we're going to be able to manage that with what we have that,
Mhm.
that has not been appropriated already. So, coming in the coming weeks, I think, we've got FY22 pretty much settled, but we're going to have to look at FY21 and
Mhm.
really take a hard look at what we need for resources for those last, 7 or 8 weeks of school if we do go back
Mhm.
full time K through 5. So that's some of the work that we have to do. As far as FY22, the budget, we have to keep in mind that a lot of what we did in FY22 is based off of those grants. And it's you feel like Wile E. Coyote walking off the end of a cliff because that cliff's only going to go so far, before the rock snaps and you head down into the gully. So we know that funding's there for FY22, but going beyond, that's going to be an awful budget going into FY23 because a lot of those dollars are going to dry up. So need to keep an eye on that. One thing that did come up at our meeting the other night, and I promised that I would bring it to the full committee because I think it's something that we really haven't been hit with anything with this before, and it has to do with the Minnetonka Stabilization Fund and where we pull money out. All right. So the discussion that we had the other night is that we know that the pool heater in this school is failing and will need to be replaced. I believe the cost was $20,000. The question was, if we have the money to pull it out of the budget this year, or to pull it out of funding that we have in the general fund to fund that, or should it come out from the Minnetonka Stabilization Fund? I had opined that I thought it should come out of the stabilization fund because those are that's what that money is there for. And I feel that it would be unwise for us to take 20,000. It's not a ton of money, but 20,000 out of a budget is still 20,000 out of a budget. It's enough money where if I gave anybody in this room a check for $20,000, you'd have a smile on your face. So, but I promised that I would bring it back to the full committee just to give Aaron some guidance on it. And so I would ask people, do you have a preference, a strong feeling either way?
So I believe part of the question that came up the other night was from Carol in Hamden, where she asked what the guidance was for that stabilization account. And so I'd be interested to understand what the use of that funds could be for and how. That's the first time I remember hearing about it. It may have been mentioned last year or maybe the year before, but I think it's the first time when we've actually really talked about the possibility of using the funds from there. But she did make a good point about asking, what was the guidance for how those funds would be used?
So I've been doing this for 6 years. We've never pulled anything out of there. I don't know if there was ever any formal guidance provided to the district with regards to where the guardrails were as far as utilizing those funds. Back when this school was built, the agreement was that there would be a stabilization fund, and the school committee would commit dollars every single year,
Right.
so that there would be a fund available, so that the premature demise of the old Minnetonka did not happen again, and there would be money available.
Sure.
Again, I mean, I don't know. I mean,
Right.
I would have to go back and probably go back. The person to ask would be Peter Salerno, who was, on the
Right.
committee and chair when I believe when the school was authorized to be built. Kate, does that sound right to you? So I don't know if we have any particular guidance. I've never seen a document that gives us guidance with regards to that. But
I can look for that.
But I would say that if there is not, then I sort of think that it would come under the purview of the school committee, which is to set the budget is our job. And if there isn't a document, I just want to have guidance from the members of this committee how we should move forward.
I thought the idea was great that we would do maybe an offset. So we usually put in $50,000. I think that we have budgeted, right? So why don't we take $20,000 for the heater for the pool and put $30,000 into the stabilization fund? Bill brought that up. I thought it was a great compromise.
Sure.
So I guess, Bill, my only thought, to it would be $50,000 for the building that we have a year. It's woefully inadequate, right? So if we have a true issue, we're not going to have money to support it. And that's why I think we have to take care of it. And your proposal probably makes the most sense, but it's why I would go back to, we need to find a way to have athletics get closer to self-funding so that it has the funds to offset something like a heater in a pool going, so that if we have an issue with a chiller, or if we have an major issue with our HVAC system, roof, etc., we're using the money from the stabilization fund for that versus a pool heater. But I think where we are right now, it's probably the best proposal out there. But it is problematic as far as what we have and what our potential liabilities are with this building.
And I think I took the question from Carol being that similar to that, because she was asking about how does it work versus the stabilization account versus the capital line usage for it, because of what it actually was. Because I know when we were talking about it, you had mentioned how we would absorb that expense. And so it was more along the lines of from the advisory level of understanding how that account should work or could work.
So as a capital expense, because this is a shared building owned by the district, I think that's a non-issue. To Patrick's point, when we have the bigger expenses, like, that's something we have to keep in mind. My personal feeling is that the offset would make the most sense for this particular repair. We know it's going to need to be done. I don't want to pull money out of the general fund and put that towards a pool here. Now the pool does benefit, the athletics program, but it also benefits, the community as a whole. I think the offset would work great. What I would propose that we do, if there's no objection from the other members of the committee, is that as part of the budget subcommittee process, we work with the towns, the finance and advisory boards from both towns, maybe even include select board, but let's come up with some guardrails. Let's come up with some parameters of how that money should be utilized. And also maybe even look at some minimum expenses, right? So if you've got a $5,000 expense, well, that would be absorbed by the district. And is there a threshold in which after that would pick up? And more importantly is, I don't think it's ever been delineated, is, would we then bring it to the committee and the committee then approves it, which I think would be the right thing to do. I think that's why we're here.
If I can jump in, how much money is in the account now?
To be honest, I couldn't give you an answer. I could have an answer next time. I don't. It's not something I've dug into yet.
Less than $1 million. So right. So I mean, when we did it before, I think it'd probably be around $500,000.
Right.
$500,000.
I can definitely find that. I've just been focused on other things at the moment.
No. I got you.
Okay.
It's just
If I had to guess, I'm going to guess somewhere around 700,000. That's sort of knowing what we had in that when we started and knowing what our funding has been. I'm going to say 700 is probably a reasonable estimate.
We'll get that information.
Less than $1 million for sure. So I appreciate, if anybody has anything else. I don't know, Michelle, do you guys have any feeling on it either way?
No, other than I just remember the whole point of the stabilization fund was, as you said, so that this new Minnetonka didn't fade away in 20 years as the old Minnetonka did. And that was the purpose of instituting that stabilization fund. I don't recall any parameters in how we make a decision. I don't recall any in the 9 years I've been here. So I think it's a good idea to come up with some parameters. And I think for this, it makes the most sense to just take the 20,000 out of the 50 you'd put in, and that way it's a done deal. And yeah.
I'd also like us to consider that when the debt is paid off, that we still put that money or something close to that into the stabilization fund, as a, and that's maybe something that we can work out, Bill, in this whole proposal and get it passed to the school committee. I think that would be farsighted. How many more years do we have to pay on this, Al? or Aaron?
That's another question. I can get that for you as well, too, yeah.
Bill, do you remember
Somehow-
off the top of your head?
Oh, boy. We set the bond, it was 24 years, so I'm gonna say another 20,
Yeah.
another 20 or 19.
So
Well,
what
and
we do know from Hampden, right, for our Hampden advisory meeting that they just finished paying the bond for Green Meadows, right? So that was,
Right.
you'll see that in the budget presentation, yeah.
So I tell you what, we're gonna be we're gonna be popping Geritol pills and pulling our diapers up by the time that gets around to paying off. So
Hey, Bill, can we just go over some dates just so that we can get that out?
that was next. That was next.
Okay, sorry.
All right, that was next. So important dates. Roundtable, March 11th, next Thursday night, 7 p.m. You have policy, but I think it's
We'll
rapid fire.
wrap it up.
So 7 p.m. I can't imagine we're going to have enough people where we need to use the auditorium. I think here is fine. It'll be a hybrid format, just like this meeting. I did put calls out to all three of the legislators, Senator Lesser and Representatives Ash and Pupolo. I was able to make physical contact in Representative Pupolo's office, and Sherry is well aware of it. And Senator Lester's office, I know, is aware of it, and Representative Ash's office is aware too. So they will most likely be logging into that. So, but feel free. I like the idea of in person. It just makes it a little bit easier. You can kind of read body language and see people's faces and watch their facial expressions, even if they have masks on. We're all becoming very good at reading eyes and eyebrows. So, the invitations have gone out. That meeting, and the only thing I need to work out with you, Al, and with Kate is this is the budget roundtable. Do we want to have questions, and what would the format look like for that? Because with that roundtable, you could have questions from the public, much like we did on tonight. If you have a public comment link or questions, we can screen them when they come in.
Okay.
So I don't have an answer to that, but I think you and I need to talk about that because I think that's important for that.
I think that we're lucky now that we have this hybrid way of doing the meetings where you have some in person and some online, that if we could have them submitted in written forms and then have someone just put them together and maybe read them out, I think might be, or at least summarize that might be something we might want to consider, but that's
So I would only ask to see if we would consider some other format that would allow for people may have questions as they go through and information is provided. So if we decide we want to try to attempt to use the chat, we can maybe designate one person who follows the chat. But the requirement is you have to state your name and potentially like your address, like you would if you were in a town meeting. And so that way, whomever is monitoring the chat can then say, I have a chat question, and read the person's name and then the question. It wouldn't be allowed open for other people, but you just have to make sure that other people watching, because it can be distracting having the chat. But I mean, I think it still gives that public attendance ability.
yeah.
So I think so that date rolls into the next date, which is our public hearing. Now, we have the public hearing is slated right now for March 22nd, which gives us plenty of time before we have to, being a budget item to be placed on the warrant. It has to be placed on 45 days at a minimum before the town meeting. This puts us well within that, but we have a school committee meeting on the 18th. And so Al and I had kind of batted around the idea of maybe doing the public hearing. We've already seen a preview tonight. I don't know if we would feel comfortable putting the slides up on the website. That way people could have an idea of what they're looking at. And if we held the public hearing on the 18th, we could actually do the public hearing. We have the full committee together. We could vote on the budget that night, and that would obviate having a second meeting on the 22nd. As I said before, I need more meetings like I need a sharp stick in the eye. So
Great idea.
I make a motion to combine the budget roundtable and
to combine the public hearing.
I'm sorry, to combine the public hearing and the school committee meeting on the 18th as the same meeting.
Do we need a motion, or can we just
apologize.
say?
Can we just say it?
I'm looking at my phone to look at the calendar. So if we did the 18th, which is great, so we can combine those two together, which we've done in the past. So if we say 5 o'clock start time for the excuse me, 5 o'clock start time, and then we can go right to the school committee at 6 o'clock. Does that work for everybody?
Yeah.
I'm just worried about timing only because it is the public hearing. A lot of people are getting out of work at 5 o'clock, and I'm a little concerned that you may run up against people trying to get out of work and showing up. I know, like tonight, I got hung up in the office, so physically I didn't get here until later. What if we were to start the school committee meeting, do a hard stop at 6, do the public hearing from say 6 to 7, and then continue? At least that way, folks will be able to, get in their cars, get home, and it'll be a more, treat it like a regular in-person attendance meeting. At least that way they would have the opportunity to get home. And if that's all right with everybody when we set the agenda.
Yep. And you'll vote.
Do you want us to vote on the budget though? So typically, right, when we've done that in the past, I felt like we voted on the budget right after, when we had the combined, we voted on the budget afterwards.
Correct.
So we could move it to 6 o'clock for the public hearing and then do a meeting at 7 or 7:30 if you want to have the vote that night. I just question having the vote and then having the public hearing.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Oh, no, yeah, no, do the.
I think you're just a part of the meeting. It's not what you're talking about, not doing a vote.
Yeah, I think what Bill was saying was do the school committee
Business.
meeting business from 5 to 6. Then we have the presentation at 6, and then we come back afterwards and we vote on the budget and anything else that we didn't get to. I think that's what he meant there.
That's typically what we've done. Okay. But I think it would be.
So while Bill's doing that, I think what we're saying, if I hear on the 18th, we'll do the public presentation, we'll do a school committee, and we'll have school committee vote on the budget as well too, all on the 18th. Is that correct?
Yes.
Perfect. Kate, you go with that in terms of how we'll post it?
But I just need the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if we start the school committee meeting at 5, we do business in the school committee until 6. We do a hard stop at 6. We begin the public presentation, public hearing, take comments or take questions. And then we do a hard stop at 7 for the vote. And then we just continue on with the school committee. Okay. We can just squeeze it in there and it will obviate the need for a second meeting. I don't think that's really necessary, especially because, again, thank you to all of the members of the finance committee. I think this is the first year where we've really had a budget number solidified so early in the process. A lot of times we were running up against it in the 11th hour. So we can get the information out on the website. People can look at it ahead of time and then, have informed questions rather than, just, blitzing them with it that night. So, all right, good.
And the last date is for each town to have their public forums we have that date.
You're talking town meetings?
Town meetings, I'm sorry, yes.
Yeah.
Usually May something.
Yeah, I think it's the 10th, if I remember correctly.
For both towns, it's the same day.
Correct.
And that will give us the 45 days voting on it on for those people that are new to our committee, voting on it on the 18th, we'll have to have it the 45 days and make sure before we go to town.
Yeah.
Right.
And then finally, we will be meeting budget sub Monday night. That'll be March 8th at 5 p.m.
And I just want to say one last thing, like that we got our budget all pretty much wrapped up and that we're ready to move forward to vote on it is unbelievable. Communities, and I'm working with Lower Pioneer Valley that are not really nearly to the point they are with their budget, but being a regional school district that we are, I'm commiserating with my colleague in Southwood, Granville Tolland, who also is working their budget as well too, in terms of the timeline different for a regional school district as opposed to municipalities, unbelievable. So thank you, everyone.
I want to just bring up one quick point. Years ago, when I came on the committee, this process did not go this smoothly. And Bill brought up a good point to thank the members of the finance and advisory committee. But I also want to say thank you to Bill because we were talking about this, how we can have a less contentious process. And through Bill's leadership, I got to say, we really were able to make this a lot smoother with participation from the towns, where they would tell us exactly what they need and we gave them what they needed, even to the point where you had 2 different letters written up just to make sure which one is better, so that when we submit it, it's done the way they need it. You know, it's that type of leadership, I guess, from our committee that was needed. And so, yeah, Bill,
Agreed.
kudos to you as well, sir.
Well, thanks, Sean. I would reiterate back. I would say that, you know, it's a team effort. So I appreciate all of the help that everybody has given this process, because it's a great process. I think there's still room for improvement. There's always rooms to make things better, to tweak things, but you know, I'm gratified. So I appreciate it. You guys have any questions for me as far as finance and operations? So, and again, thank you to Wilbraham Finance for their voted confidence, providing that budget number for us. Absolutely huge, makes the process a lot easier. So respectfully submitted.
Seeing as no questions, we'll move on to the next agenda item, consent agenda.
I make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Second.
Do we have to do a roll call vote for that? Okay, so I'm just checking. Yep. Dr. Bontempi?
Aye.
Michelle Boudreau?
Aye.
Michelle Immersion? Aye. Sean Kennedy?
Aye.
Patrick Kiernan?
Aye.
Myself, Mara Ryan? Aye. It passes all. Unanimous. Next
warrants
item
are
is to
going
approve the
around.
warrants.
Yep, they're going around. I think everyone signed them. Yep.
Okay. Future agenda items, we have the strategic plan and the equity audit, but we do have a need for an executive session.
Mara, I'm so sorry. Can we also add to this future agenda items? And I know it was brought to my attention by Michelle Boudreau today. Could we also audit transfers for next year? For if we can add that to a future agenda item for next school committee meeting?
Yep.
Parents that are
Well,
requesting transfers from one school to another.
two other quick requests. Are we going to have any school choice next year? Because typically this is about when we vote on that. So I didn't know if that is something that's going to occur or not because of spacing concerns. Then the second one had to do with, as part of the equity audit, could we have the Diversity and Inclusion Club from Minnetonka speak with us? Great to hear what they've learned, what they're doing, and how they're taking some of their lessons and putting them into action.
Great. And we also have professional learning on March 17th that our entire district is going to have some professional learning as well too. So we can add that as well. And Mark, can I just squeeze in like HWRSD updates for the future agenda items? And the reason why I'm going to ask, I know that's part of it, but I'm squeezing this in. So I'm getting yelled at a little bit by some of my elementary principals, and I will get as well tomorrow. So just as to back to what Michelle Immersion said earlier. So when we're giving that information out to our families, we're really looking for some concrete information when we're surveying or getting the information from our elementary parents. So next Friday, I'm putting
You just said it wasn't a survey, Al.
I know, but I really need, that's going to be like some concrete stuff that we're going to be asking for people. Sorry.
So if sorry, when I was driving in, I was listening, I was trying to chime in. One of the things that I wanted to make sure that that we were doing was any information that we sent out to the parents, making sure, because I know when we did the quote unquote survey back in the beginning of the year, asking remote, hybrid, et cetera, some parents were confused and didn't realize that, you know, what they were making from the choice was actually the determination that they were asking for. So we need to make crystal clear to them, you know, is it information gathering, or, you know, when they send us something, are they saying this is what I definitely want?
Yep.
So that was it. The only other piece that I had to say was, because we were talking about, and I apologize for circling back. I was trying to get in, but it's kind of hard on my car phone. Is, you know, the return to school. And Sean, you had a lot of questions with regards to the CDC. And I would point to the fact that, I mean, one of the biggest obstacles that we have is the Centers for Disease Control, and the fact that
it is the virus that we have. That's the biggest obstacle. Bill.
No, what
it's
I'm
not
saying,
the CDC. It's the virus. Bill, please don't politicize it more than it already is.
I hope I'm allowed to speak.
You are.
So the idea of the CDC is that they have already come out and made their statement that they believe that for the health of well-being of students, the students should be allowed back into the schools. Where the CDC has failed is that they've failed to modify or come up with any concessions with regards to their mitigation strategies that would allow for that to happen. So I look at what they're doing as sort of an unfunded mandate, where they're saying you have to do this or you should do this, but they're not giving you any parameters with which to work. So that was the only thing I had to say. I mean, I think that's probably the biggest, the biggest obstacle that many have is that, you've got the commissioner talking about returning children to school and, doing so sort of by executive fiat, if you will, but at the same time, you have members of the community, they're saying, but the CDC says this. But if you read the CDC's recommendations, they also say, we believe that children need to be back in school. And there's, the American Academy of Allergy and Immunology and the American Academy of Pediatrics, they've all said the same thing. So
one other thing that had come up at a previous meeting, school improvement plans. And if there were going to be those this year or not.
So, so I'm going to be speaking to you guys as a school committee and asking if we could possibly put a hold on those who looking where we're at right now as for the work that our principals are doing at this level, and get ready to present them early in the fall of next year, because the work that our principals have done this year has been astronomical. So if we could just put a hold on that, and I know a lot of school districts are doing that, and looking at what education is going to look like next year, and we'll do a full school improvement plan presentation for the fall of next year.
Okay.
I just have one quick thing I wanted to say. So as people on the school committee, we get calls from members of the community. Sometimes when they have issues, of course, the process is they go to the principals. Before first you go to your teacher, and then you go to the principal, and then after that you'd go to a superintendent, and sometimes we get calls. I know everyone here probably gets a bunch of these calls. I do. And, where they ask for help, and we do the best that we can in communicating with the superintendent and stuff and trying to help these parents out. So I got a surprise package in the mail, and one of the parents, it's April and John Beston. They had a little envelope, and inside the envelope, if you guys can see it, I asked if I could show this, and they said it could. They sent me 2 pictures of their kids, Olivia and Derek, and it just meant so much to me. I was like, geez, because that's really what it's all about, right? Here's 2 kids, that these are her kids and his kids, and this is why we're here, and this is why we're doing it. So it was just, I had a little moment, and I wanted to share it because you guys are all doing the same thing. I'm going to put these on my fridge next to my own kids and my neighbors, and it's just, guys, that's why we're here. That's why we're doing it. This is just someone who sent me some pictures, but these are real people, real decisions about real children. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing as none, we do have a need for executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation, including the town of Hamden, ETEL versus Hamden Wilbraham Regional School District. TAL, if open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. We will take a roll call vote to go into executive session, but once we're done with executive session, we'll come back out of executive session to roll call to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Roll call vote. Dr. Bontempi. Michelle Boudreau.
Aye.
Michelle Lemurgy.
Aye.
Sean Kennedy.
Aye.
Patrick Kiernan.
Aye.
And Mara Ryan. Aye. We are now in executive session. I've got a minute break.